Sometimes the things that we crave is the thing that we won't talk about. And not because we're unsure, but because it almost feels kind of sacred. Like if we said it out loud, it might lose some of its magic.
Welcome to The Artwork of You, the podcast where your life is the canvas and you are the masterpiece. I'm your host, Lori Guin, and together we'll explore creativity, self-awareness, mindset, goal strategy, and the importance of accountability so that you can paint your life's portrait with confidence and ease. Remember, in the gallery of life, you're not just a spectator, you are the art. So let's grab our brushes and start creating the masterpiece that is you.
Hello, my friends. I am so glad that you are here with me today because today I want to talk about something that I read recently that really made me stop, and I just right away wrote it down. And it was a post by Cathy Heller on Instagram. Apparently, Matthew McConaughey was a guest on her podcast, and he said, "What if what you crave is actually part of your destiny?" And now, if you've been listening to my show for a while, you know that I had an episode about Matthew McConaughey where he talked about, I think it was episode 32, he talked about his Oscar speech and his 3-pillar approach to life. But this time, when I read that quote about what you crave being your destiny, I purposely did not go look that up or research what he meant by that. And I didn't listen to their episode because I didn't want to be influenced by his interpretation or their conversation. I wanted to really think about what the idea meant to me. Because that question, what if what you crave is actually part of your destiny? I don't think that I've ever really heard it put like that before. And I think that there's really something worth exploring there. And so that's what I want to do today. I want to explore that with you from my perspective. And I want to ask some questions that I think might help you reconnect with something that you've been craving, but maybe you've been trying to silence it or push it aside. But let's first start with the word crave. I think that sometimes it gets a negative rap because we tend to think of craving as something impulsive, something you're supposed to resist. Craving's what you do at midnight when you're standing in front of the refrigerator looking for a snack. Or possibly you could even think of craving as endless scrolling. You're craving for some kind of distraction. And so I'd say it kind of gets lumped in with weakness, so to speak, or a lack of discipline with wanting too much. But the craving that I'm talking about today, and the one I believe that Matthew McConaughey was talking about, is different. I'm talking about the deep soul level pull, the thing that you keep coming back to, the idea, the desire, the vision that won't leave you alone, no matter how many times you try to rationalize it away. I'm not talking about a quick hit or a passing phase. I'm talking about that thing that sits in the back of your mind and tells you you were meant for this, even when your life appears to be fine and running smoothly as is for the most part. I think most of us have been told that when we have thoughts like that kind of craving, that it might be more like a whim, like a fleeting thought. We might have been taught to dismiss it as unrealistic or self-indulgent or irresponsible, especially once we become parents, especially if it doesn't fit neatly into the version of your life that other people understand or approve of. And so we downplay it. We file it away under that elusive someday. Sometimes we try to convince ourselves that it was never important to begin with. But what if it is important? What if it's the most honest thing about you? And I really want you to think about this. I want you to think about, is there something that you crave that you push aside? And not because you're not pushing it aside because it's bad or wrong, but maybe because it feels too big or too inconvenient or too far away from the life that you've built so far, the life that you're living now. So just sit with that for a second. Because what if what you crave isn't there to mess with your head? What if it's there to guide you? I think one of the reasons we get so tangled up around this idea of craving is because we don't really have, I would say, the language that separates it from something like a goal or a dream. But they're not the same, in my opinion. Not even really close. I would say goals are more logical. They're structured usually, they're measurable. They usually have a checklist attached, something you do or don't do. You put them in your planner, your vision board, on a spreadsheet. And obviously, there's nothing wrong with that. Clearly, goals can be a very powerful tool. I help clients all the time achieve their goals, set their goals. But goals are often decided. They're the things that we choose based on often what we think is possible, what's accessible to us, what fits into the time frame that we've given ourselves. And then there are dreams. On the other hand, they feel bigger, usually, sometimes a little bit more abstract, like someday I'll write a book, or someday I'll live by the ocean, or someday I'll start that business. But because they're kind of dreamy, we tend to keep them at arm's length. There's not really a plan behind the dream, just a picture that we can return to when our real life maybe seems boring or uninspiring. But then there's craving. And I would say that craving lives in your body because you can feel it. You don't need to justify it. You don't even need to necessarily always understand it. And it's not something like just this new idea you try on. It's something that's been with you. Something that stirs when you see someone else doing the thing that you want, or when you're in an environment that reminds you of it. Sometimes maybe it comes kind of like a flash. I'd say it's generally emotional, because again, you can feel it. And sometimes it might even feel like grief, because in your mind, you might be thinking it's never going to be a reality. Or maybe sometimes it feels like an obsession. The point is that it doesn't go away. Something about it is always in the back of your mind. And it doesn't care if you think it's responsible or reasonable or well-timed, because it just keeps showing up. And I'd say that's what makes it sometimes so easy to dismiss, but also maybe what makes it so important to pay attention to. So here's another thing I would like you to ask yourself. Is the thing that you say that you want, or the thing that's in the back of your mind, something that you chose? Or is it something that chose you? Because that's what a craving feels like. It feels like being chosen, like something in the world is calling you towards it. And it's your responsibility to stop pretending that you don't hear it. As I said, it can feel like guilt or fear. And when that craving goes against what's expected of you at this point in your life, or what's currently working in your life, it can almost even feel like a threat, I would say. Again, we're taught to be rational, to make practical choices, to make smart decisions. And craving doesn't always play by those rules. It doesn't show up with a timeline or a 10-point action plan. It just kind of shows up. And we've been conditioned to think that if something doesn't come with a clear path forward, we shouldn't take it seriously. When everything just seems to be going along smoothly, or when you've already, say, committed to a certain role or a career or a certain identity or a relationship or the location where you live, and the craving that you're having doesn't fit into any of that. And so instead of exploring it, you talk yourself out of it. I know that was certainly my story with creating a coaching business. Now isn't the right time. I should be grateful for what I already have. Who am I to want something more? I don't know if that sounds familiar to you, but that was certainly my story. But again, that craving doesn't go away. The desire to coach never went away just because I tried to push it away. And just because you don't act on it. And in fact, I think the longer that you ignore it, the more uncomfortable you can become in your own skin and in your life. When everything looks good on the outside, doesn't mean it's good on the inside. And let me just say, I'm not saying like burn it all down, right? I'm not talking about making some big dramatic change. I'm not telling you to walk out of your job or your relationship or move out of the city where you're living. What I'm saying is that if you've been carrying a craving for something for years, even maybe for months, and it keeps showing up in different ways, stop dismissing it. Start listening to it. Ask what it's trying to tell you. And just to get back to the original quote for a second, again, what if what you crave is actually part of your destiny? What if that craving isn't random? What if it's not a distraction or a temptation or a test or anything else we might tell ourselves? What if it's more of a map? Not a full roadmap with step-by-step directions, but more like a pull in a certain direction, or a nudge in a certain direction, or like a signal or a breadcrumb. I think we're so used to thinking of destiny as something out there, like it's this mystical pre-written plan that either happens or it doesn't happen. But what if destiny is something that we co-create, and that the clues are kind of baked into the things that we're drawn to over and over again? Maybe the craving that you keep trying to suppress is actually like the thread that connects you to a more aligned version of yourself, a version where you don't feel like you're playing a role, a version where you feel like things are just so aligned with who you are. It's something that lights you up, that's hard to explain. And it maybe doesn't make sense to anyone else. Maybe it's not Instagrammable or something that's really impressive to people. Maybe it feels weird or strange, but that doesn't mean that it's not real. And what if that thing that you crave is a message, maybe from your future self or from your true self, the version of you that exists beyond what's practical or performative, the version of you who already knows? And I'll say this again because I think it's really, really important. The craving, it's not the problem. Ignoring it is. And what you'll find is that most people, they're not going to follow this map, this nudge, because they're waiting for permission or for certainty or for external validation or for somebody to tell them that it's worth pursuing. But maps don't work like that. Cravings don't work like that. You don't get the full picture until you take the first step. And I also want to make it clear that not every craving is meant to be pursued. Sometimes they really are just a distraction or a temporary desire. So it's valid to question them. But there are some cravings that stick, and they don't stick because you're confused. They stick because you're being called. And so how do you know the difference? Here are a few questions that I ask myself, and I would really encourage you to ask yourself too. The first thing is, has it been with you for a while? Is this craving showing up time and time again, maybe on and off for months or years? Pay attention, because real cravings have staying power. They will show up in different forms. They might evolve, but they don't ever disappear. I would also ask myself, do you feel strangely protective of it? And what I mean by that is, sometimes the things that we crave is the thing that we won't talk about. And not because we're unsure, but because it almost feels kind of sacred. Like if we said it out loud, it might lose some of its magic. That it's kind of a protective feeling. That's often a sign, I will say, that it matters more to you than you're letting on. I would also ask, does it bring you closer to your sense of self? When you imagine pursuing it, do you feel more like you, more successful? Not more admired, but more you. Because that's the kind of craving that's worth exploring too. And number 4, this one can be a little, I don't know, people might have opinions, but are you jealous of the people that are doing it? I know it's uncomfortable, but it could be a clue, because jealousy often reveals something you deeply desire but haven't allowed yourself to claim. So if you find yourself jealous or annoyed or activated by someone doing the thing, not because they're doing it wrong, but because you wish you were doing it or you wish that was you, that's also something to look at. And here's what I would say is the most important question of all. What's the story you've been telling yourself about why you can't have it? That story, whatever it is often where the real work needs to begin. It might be a belief about your age, your timing, your responsibilities, your talents, your worth, but those stories can be rewritten. And sometimes the first step in allowing a craving is just calling out the lie that's been sitting in front of it. I'd also suggest that if you're someone who journals or reflects on things, I would really invite you to do this, to sit with the question, if I didn't have to explain myself to anyone, what would I let myself crave? And then just let it be messy, let it be honest, and let it be yours, all yours. All right, so to wrap it up, what if what you're craving, the one that's been with you for a long time, the one you keep trying to downplay, the one that feels almost too personal to admit, what if it's not something outside of you? What if it's you calling yourself forward? What if it's the version of you that's more alive, more fulfilled, more in integrity with who you actually are? It's there. It's waiting for you to recognize it. We spend so much time trying to outgrow these desires, trying to be okay with the things as they are, trying not to want too much, trying not to ask too much, trying not to be too much. But what if the thing you crave is not something to outgrow? What if it's something to grow into? I would almost say sometimes we think these cravings are dangerous because they make us question what's working. But maybe they're showing up because something inside of us knows we're meant for more, or something different, or something better aligned with who we are. Not because we're broken, of course. Not because you're missing something, but because you're evolving. And so I want to say, you're not being selfish for wanting something more. You're being honest. And honesty is the first step toward becoming the person you are meant to be. So if you're sitting with a craving right now, even if you don't know what to do with it yet, I hope you won't push it away. I hope you'll be curious about it. And I hope that you'll give it a little space to breathe.
That's a wrap for today, my friends. Thank you for sharing your time with me. And remember to show up in your life like the masterpiece you are, because you are the artwork. Please subscribe and leave a 5-star review. Have a fabulous day.